She needs this opportunity more than you do. Just be a good sister and let her have it. That is what my mother whispered to me when she cornered me at my table in the back of the room. On the stage, my younger sister Chloe was holding a glass trophy, smiling for the cameras, taking credit for a sustainable community center blueprint I spent 2 years building. She told me if I ruined her big moment, I would be dead to this family. I did not yell. I did not cry. I just sat at table 72 and watched her soak up the applause. I watched because I knew something they did not. I knew that the Foundation's legal compliance team was already walking up the side stairs of the stage, holding a manila folder with my time-stamped original files. What happened next did not just end her acceptance speech. It blacklisted her from the entire architecture industry. Before we get into this, please take a moment to like and subscribe to Sweet Life Drama, but do it only if this story truly resonates with you, and drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know where you are right now. My name is Maya. I am 29 years old. Now let me take you back to 8 months ago, to a cold Tuesday night in Chicago, and the moment I realized my family saw my life's work as a donation to my sister's ego. I work as an independent urban space designer. For 2 years, I poured every weekend and late night into a single project, a sustainable community center designed for a vacant lot in the South Side. It was complex. Rainwater harvesting systems, load-bearing calculations for green roofs, passive solar heating. It was the portfolio piece that was supposed to launch my own firm. I lived in a rented 2-bedroom apartment in the Loop. The second bedroom was my office. I had one rule about my office: nobody goes in. I came home early from a site visit that Tuesday. The front door was unlocked. I walked down the hall and saw the light on in my office. Chloe was sitting at my desk. She is 26. Her Instagram bio says creative director, but she has never drafted a blueprint, held a tape measure, or managed a budget. She curates mood boards and posts photos of coffee cups next to fabric swatches. When she heard my footsteps, she jumped. She pulled a silver USB drive from the side of my desktop tower and shoved it into her designer purse. "I was just looking for a phone charger," she said. Her voice pitched high, the way it always did when she was caught. I walked past her. I looked at the monitor. My CAD software was open. The master file for the community center was sitting right in the center of the screen. The export log showed a transfer completed 2 minutes ago. I turned to face her. "Put the drive on the desk, Chloe." She backed toward the door, her grip tightening on her bag. "You are being paranoid, Maya. I just needed to borrow your charger." She ran past me and left the apartment. The heavy wooden door clicked shut behind her. I did not chase her down the hallway. I picked up my phone and called my parents. They live in a townhouse in Evanston. They had co-signed my apartment lease when I was a graduate student, a fact they brought up whenever they needed leverage to force my compliance. My mother answered. I explained what Chloe did. I kept my voice level. I stated the facts. "Chloe entered my workspace without permission. Chloe stole a proprietary architectural file containing thousands of hours of unpaid labor." "Maya, stop being dramatic," my mother said. Her tone was flat, bored, like I was complaining about a borrowed sweater. "Your sister is trying to build her brand. She probably just wanted to look at your drawings to learn. You should be flattered." My father took the phone. I could hear the television playing a sports game in the background. "Your sister struggles to find her footing. You have a degree. You have a career. Stop acting so jealous of her. Let her find her inspiration." Jealous. I stood in my office, looking at 2 years of structural engineering on my screen, while my father called me jealous of a girl who stole my work because she could not do the math herself. They did not see my blueprints as my intellectual property. They saw them as a family resource, sitting on a shelf, available for Chloe to take whenever she needed to look successful. If I fought them then, it would be a screaming match. It would be tears and accusations. Chloe would play the victim, crying that I was trying to stifle her creativity. I knew how the script went. I had lived it my entire life. I ended the call. I sat down at my desk. I opened the master file. I did not delete anything. I did not change the visible design. Instead, I went into the foundational layers of the digital model. I selected the load-bearing calculations for the steel framework, the exact numbers that held the building up. Deep inside the metadata, I embedded a digital steganography watermark, a hidden signature coded directly into the geometry of the file. It read, Original Concept in Structural Engineering by Maya, registered U.S. copyright. I locked the layer using a cryptographic key. I packaged the raw files, the sketch histories, and the time-stamped cloud logs. I paid the fee and submitted the entire bundle to the United States Copyright Office. I did not say another word about it to my family. I let them think I dropped it. I let Chloe think she got away with stealing my future. The silence lasted exactly 1 month. Then came the family dinner where Chloe brought her fiancé Andre, raised her glass, and made a brazen announcement that forced me to set a trap she would never see coming. A month passed, the kind of quiet that feels like a held breath before a dive. Then came the third Sunday in November. Sunday dinners at my parents' house in Evanston were mandatory. If I missed one, my mother would find a way to punish me for weeks. I sat at the mahogany dining table, pushing a piece of roasted chicken around my plate. The room smelled of rosemary and expensive candle wax. Andre sat across from me. He is a commercial real estate developer from Atlanta, smart, observant, and recently engaged to my sister. He spent the first 20 minutes discussing zoning permits for a new high-rise downtown. I listened, adding a brief comment about urban shadow studies. He nodded with genuine interest. Chloe scrolled on her phone, bored by the technical talk. My father poured his second glass of red wine, his face flushed with the heat of the room. Chloe set her phone face down. She cleared her throat. It was a delicate, practiced sound designed to draw every eye in the room. She reached into her designer tote bag and pulled out a sleek black presentation folder. She slid it to the center of the table. I have news, she said. Her voice carried that bright, breathy pitch she reserved for an audience. I am officially entering the National Design Awards. My father stopped chewing. My mother dropped her napkin and clapped her hands together. Andre smiled, leaning in to rub Chloe's shoulder. I kept my eyes on the black folder. Chloe flipped it open. Inside lay 4 glossy, high-resolution 3D renders. I stared at the pages. The breath left my lungs in one slow, invisible exhale. It was the community center. My community center. The one I had engineered for the vacant lot on the south side. She had changed the exterior brick from charcoal to terracotta. She had altered the tint of the solar panels on the roof, but the bones were mine. The asymmetrical glass atrium, the cantilevered reading room, the integrated rainwater catch basins built into the courtyard steps. It was my brain, my math, my sleepless nights, printed on heavy cardstock and sitting next to the gravy boat. It is an eco-friendly urban hub, Chloe said, waving a manicured hand over the images. I want to focus on sustainability, healing the city through green spaces. It is brilliant, my mother said, tracing the edge of the paper. Richard, look at those windows! Our girl has a gift. I put my fork down. The silver clinked against the porcelain. The sound cut through the celebration. The cantilevered reading room, I said. My voice was flat. It extends 20 feet over the pedestrian walkway. Chloe blinked. The bright smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Yes, it creates a floating effect. It is a bold aesthetic choice. It is a structural liability if you do not anchor it properly, I replied. What is the tensile strength of the steel beams you specified for that overhang? And how are you balancing the load against the rainwater retention tanks on the roof? Silence dropped over the table. Not a confused silence, a heavy, loaded one. Andre leaned forward. He looked at the renders, then looked at Chloe. He builds commercial towers for a living. He understands load distribution. He knows those are not aesthetic questions. They are the questions that keep a building from collapsing onto a sidewalk. Well, Chloe stammered. A faint red flush crept up her neck. The engineers will figure out the exact numbers later. This is the conceptual phase, Maya. You are getting bogged down in the tedious details. She is getting bogged down in jealousy, my mother snapped. She reached across the table and pulled the folder closer to Chloe, forming a physical barrier between my sister and my questions. You always do this, Maya. Your sister shares a beautiful moment, a real achievement, and you try to tear it down with your technical interrogations. It is petty. I am asking basic architectural questions about her own design, I said. My father set his wine glass down. He did not slam it. He placed it deliberately on the coaster. When he spoke, his voice held the cold, dense weight of a vault door swinging shut. You are interrogating her to make yourself feel superior, he said. You sit in your rented apartment doing freelance gigs while your sister is out here aiming for national recognition. If you cannot be supportive, you can leave. He picked up his knife and pointed it at me. But before you walk out that door, remember who holds the promissory note on your graduate school loans. Your mother and I signed those papers so you could get that fancy degree you like to flaunt. $32,000 left on the balance. We can stop covering that monthly payment tomorrow. Let us see how your freelance budget handles that. I looked at the man who raised me. He was using my education debt as a leash to force my submission. He was willing to bankrupt his eldest daughter to protect a fantasy his youngest daughter printed at a local copy shop. The unfairness did not burn, it froze. It clarified everything. A soft, wet sound came from across the table. Chloe was crying, real tears pooling in her eyes, spilling over her mascara. She pressed the heels of her hands to her cheeks, a picture of wounded innocence. I just wanted my family to be proud of me, she whispered, her voice fracturing perfectly. I worked so hard on this vision. I thought you of all people would understand, Maya. Andre wrapped his arm around her waist. He pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. He murmured quiet, soothing words, but over her shoulder, his eyes met mine. They were dark, observant, and unsettled. He did not look at me with anger. He looked at me with calculation. He had seen the hesitation in Chloe's eyes when I asked about the steal. He had heard her deflect. He was comforting his fiancée, but the seed of doubt had been planted in the soil of his mind. I could see it taking root. He was a man who respected competence, and he had just witnessed a glaring lack of it. My mother stood up to get a box of tissues. My father glared at me, waiting for the apology, waiting for me to bow my head and accept my designated role as the bitter, less successful sibling. 2 months ago, I would have argued. I would have screamed that she stole my files. I would have demanded justice right there over the dinner plates. But arguing with people who worship an illusion is like punching water. It drains your energy and leaves no mark. I realized in that dining room that truth requires a bigger stage. Words vanish in the air. Logic is twisted by tears. I needed iron. I needed undeniable, indisputable, legally binding proof. I needed a trap so flawless they would walk into it themselves. I looked at Chloe wiping her eyes. I looked at the renders of my building sitting under the chandelier. I picked up my napkin, wiped my mouth, and stood up. You are right, I said. The temperature in my voice matched the ice in my glass. It is a bold design, Chloe. I hope the judges see exactly what you put into it. I did not wait for a response. I walked out of the dining room, retrieved my coat from the hallway, and left the house. The cold Chicago wind hit my face the moment I stepped onto the porch. It felt clean. When I got back to my apartment, I did not turn on the television. I did not call a friend to vent. I sat at my desk in the dark, illuminated only by the glow of my dual monitors. I pulled up the United States Copyright Office portal. I checked the status of the encrypted metadata I had submitted a month earlier. Status approved, registration active. I leaned back in my chair. I let them have their Sunday dinner victory. I let my sister bask in the unearned praise. Because I knew the rules of the National Design Awards better than she did. I knew that the preliminary round only required conceptual renders. It was a beauty pageant for ideas. But the secondary phase, the phase that determined the finalists, required something Chloe did not possess. It required the raw CAD files. It required the foundational structural blueprints. It required the math. My sister had stolen a picture of a building, but she did not know how to build the foundation. And in exactly 3 weeks, the award foundation was going to demand its architect. She would have nowhere to hide. And she would have to come crawling to the only person who knew the numbers, Me. 3 weeks later, the email notification goes out to the semifinalists of the National Design Awards. I know this because the foundation publishes a press release on their official website. The competition is entering the technical evaluation phase. The preliminary round was a beauty pageant. It required conceptual renders, mood boards, and aesthetic visions. Chloe excels at making things look pretty. But to advance to the final three, nominees must submit comprehensive structural schematics. The judges are seasoned architects and civil engineers. They do not want pictures anymore. They demand load-bearing paths, material stress tests, wind resistance models, and foundation blueprints. They need to see the math that keeps the building standing. Chloe holds a degree in communications. She does not know how to calculate the dead load of a cantilevered steel roof. She does not know the difference between a load-bearing pillar and a decorative column. The foundation is asking for the skeleton of the project, and she only stole the skin. A knock sounds on my door at 7 in the evening. Snow is falling over Chicago, the wet, heavy kind that sticks to the glass, piling up on the windowsills and turning the city into a freezing wind tunnel. I unlock the deadbolt. Chloe stands in the hallway, shaking snow from her designer wool coat. She pushes past me into the apartment without an invitation, drops her leather bag on the kitchen island, and turns around. "I need you to fix the files," she says. No greeting, no small talk, just a demand issued with the casual authority of someone who has never been told no. "The foundation committee wants the structural breakdowns by Friday," she continues, unbuttoning her coat and tossing it over a dining chair. "The export you saved on that drive is messy. I cannot read the layer labels. I need you to clean up the CAD files and format them properly so I can submit them tomorrow." I lean against the door frame. I look at her manicured nails, her perfect blowout, the sheer entitlement radiating from her posture. "You submitted my design," I say. "You figure out the math." Chloe's face flushes red. The polished exterior cracks, revealing the panic underneath. "Do not do this right now, Maya. This is my career on the line. Just export the structural layers. It will take you 10 minutes. I walk to the kitchen sink, turn on the tap, and fill a glass of water. I take a slow sip. The water is ice cold against my teeth. "I am not doing your homework, Chloe. You wanted the credit for the vision, you take the responsibility for the engineering." She grabs her bag from the marble counter. The heavy leather snaps against the stone. "You are just bitter because you do not have the vision to sell your own work. You want to see me fail because you are stuck in this tiny apartment." She walks out. The heavy door slams shut behind her, rattling the picture frames on my wall. The phone rings less than an hour later. The caller ID shows my father's name. I press answer and hold the device to my ear. "You are going to help your sister." His voice is calm, the specific, chilling calm that comes right before a threat is executed. "I already told her no," I reply. "I am not an employee of her imaginary firm." "You are my daughter," he says, "and you live in an apartment with my name on the lease." The silence stretches between us. Outside, the wind howls against the window pane, rattling the glass. The temperature is dropping below 20 degrees tonight, the kind of cold that cuts through layers of clothing and bites into bone. "Your lease is up for renewal next month," my father continues, his tone conversational. "The landlord sent the paperwork for the co-signer's signature yesterday afternoon. I have the pen in my hand right now. You send your sister those files by tomorrow morning, or I do not sign. Let us see how fast you can find a new place with your freelance income in the middle of January." He hangs up. The line clicks dead. I lower the phone. He is willing to put me on the street in the dead of winter. He will weaponize my basic need for shelter to secure a fraudulent trophy for his favorite child. He knows the rental market requires a credit score and an income proof I cannot provide alone right now. He is using survival as a bargaining chip. The realization does not bring tears. It brings a strange, quiet clarity. A threat is only effective if the victim is trying to preserve the relationship. I have nothing left to preserve. The final thread holding my loyalty to this family snaps, clean and silent. I sit down at my desk. The dual monitors cast a pale blue light across the dark room. I pull up the master CAD file for the community center. I do not delete the data. I give them exactly what they asked for. I isolate the structural layers, the HVAC routing, the foundation load calculations. Then I open the core geometry of the building's central atrium. Deep within the foundational code of the rendering, under a sublayer titled Soil Grading Analysis, I create a hidden metadata tag. I type the text meticulously. Original Concept in Structural Engineering by Maya. Registered U.S. copyright. I lock the layer with a cryptographic key. Unless you possess the exact string of alphanumeric code, the text remains invisible on a standard screen. The rendering looks perfectly normal. The blueprints read exactly as they should, but any advanced compliance software used by a National Award Foundation will flag the encrypted layer immediately during a routine file scan. It is a digital tripwire buried in the foundation of the design. I save the file onto a silver USB drive. I pick up my phone and text Chloe. The files are ready. Come get them. The next afternoon, the doorbell rings. I open the door, bracing myself for my sister's smug face. Instead, Andre stands in the hallway. He wears a tailored charcoal overcoat and holds a leather briefcase. Chloe had a venue walkthrough for the wedding reception, he says, stepping inside and wiping his boots on the mat. She asked me to grab the drive. I lead him to the kitchen. I pick up the silver USB from the counter and hand it to him. He takes it, turning it over in his large hands. He does not put it in his pocket immediately. I looked at those renders again last night, he says. His voice carries genuine professional respect. The way you integrated the rainwater catch basins into the courtyard steps. It is brilliant spatial thinking, Maya. Chloe is lucky to have you translating her ideas into reality. I smile. The edges of my mouth feel sharp. It took a lot of late nights, I say. Those catch basins were tricky, especially calculating the hydrostatic pressure against the retaining wall when the tanks hit full capacity during a storm. I assume Chloe showed you her math on the concrete reinforcement. Andre stops turning the USB. He looks up at me. A slow, subtle shift happens in his posture. His shoulders stiffen. The casual friendliness drops away, replaced by the sharp focus of a developer assessing a risk. She mentioned it was a challenge, he says cautiously. It is, I nod, keeping my tone light, academic. Especially since she opted for a porous concrete blend for the surrounding walkway to manage the overflow. The sheer stress alone requires a very specific tension grid. Ask her about the grid placement when you see her later. I am curious if she decided to go with the diagonal or the orthogonal weave for the rebar. I do not wait for an answer. I walk to the hallway and open the front door for him. The cold air rushes in. Andre walks out. He does not say goodbye. He stops in the corridor and stares at the silver drive in his hand. He builds commercial towers for a living. He understands the physics of water retention and concrete stress. He knows what an orthogonal weave is. And he knows, as he stands under the hallway lights, that his fiancée does not have the slightest idea what any of those words mean. 3 months before the ceremony, a Tuesday evening in Manhattan, the National Design Foundation hosted an exclusive networking mixer at a rooftop venue in Chelsea. Exposed brick, floor-to-ceiling windows, panoramic views of the Hudson River. This was the proving ground. The top 10 nominees were invited to mingle with industry veterans, real estate moguls, and the preliminary judges. Chloe wore a tailored emerald silk dress. She held court near the center of the room, a glass of champagne in her hand, her laugh carrying over the low hum of the crowd. Andre stood beside her, a steady presence in a dark suit, fielding questions from potential investors. I stood 20 feet away, near a structural column, wearing a plain black blazer. I held a heavy leather portfolio case containing the printed presentation boards. My parents had insisted I come. They phrased it as a favor. Chloe needed her assistant to handle the heavy lifting. I agreed without an argument. I booked my own flight. I paid for my own hotel room. I stood in the shadows because I needed access to this specific room, on this specific night. A man approached Chloe's circle. He did not hold a drink. He moved with the quiet, unquestioned authority of someone who owned the building. I recognized him immediately from the industry magazines. Elias Vance, a veteran architect, a guest lecturer at Yale, and one of the senior judges for the awards. The crowd naturally parted for him. Chloe stood taller, flashing her brightest, most practiced smile. Andre extended a hand. Elias shook it briefly, but his eyes were fixed on the rendering board displayed on an easel next to Chloe. "Your concept for the Southside Community Center is ambitious," Elias said. His voice was gravelly, low. "The integration of the green roof is aesthetically striking, but I am looking at the subterranean cisterns." "Thank you," Chloe said, her voice breathy and bright. "We wanted the building to feel like a living organism, a space that breathes and heals the community." Elias did not smile. He pointed a long, calloused finger at the cross-section of the foundation. "Aesthetic philosophy is fine," he said, "but Chicago winters are unforgiving. You are proposing a subterranean rainwater harvesting system that holds 40,000 gallons directly beneath a load-bearing atrium. When the ground freezes, the soil expands. The hydrostatic pressure against the eastern retaining wall will be immense. How did you calculate the shear stress to prevent the concrete matrix from fracturing under the frost heave?" The jazz music playing from the live band seemed to fade. The clinking of glasses around them stopped. Chloe froze. Her smile remained fixed on her face, but the light behind her eyes vanished. She swallowed hard. Her knuckles went white around the stem of her champagne flute. She looked at the rendering board as if the answer might suddenly materialize in the white space. She looked at Andre. Andre builds commercial skyscrapers. He understands concrete matrices and frost heave. He stood perfectly still, watching his fiancée, waiting for her to answer the fundamental question about her own design. The silence stretched. It became heavy, tangible. Elias Vance lowered his hand. He tilted his head, waiting. Chloe turned her head and snapped her fingers in my direction. "Maya!" she called out. "Bring the portfolio." I stepped away from the column. I walked across the polished hardwood floor, the heavy leather case bumping against my leg. I stopped beside her. "Elias, this is my older sister, Maya," Chloe said. Her voice was pitched high, tight with panic. "She works as my drafting assistant. She handles the data input for the software. Maya, pull up the structural appendix for Mr. Vance." She handed me the shovel and expected me to dig her out. I did not open the portfolio. I did not break eye contact with Elias Vance. "We bypass standard reinforced concrete," I said. My voice was flat, measured, carrying the exact cadence of a technical briefing. "We specified a high-density geofoam layer between the eastern retaining wall and the surrounding soil. The foam acts as a compressible inclusion. When the soil freezes and expands, the geofoam absorbs the displacement, reducing the lateral earth pressure on the concrete by up to 60%. We paired that with a post-tensioned rebar grid, orthogonal weave, to handle the remaining shear stress. The calculations allow for a safety margin of 3.5 even during a record freeze." Elias Vance stopped looking at Chloe. He turned his body entirely toward me. He studied my face, assessing the quiet confidence in my posture. "You ran those calculations yourself?" he asked. "I did," I replied. He nodded slowly. A genuine smile touched the corners of his mouth. "It is an elegant solution. The geofoam application is highly efficient. Most junior architects over-engineer the concrete and ignore the soil dynamics." He reached into his breast pocket, pulled out a thick, textured business card, and held it out to me, not to Chloe. "Call my office if you ever decide you want to stop being an assistant," he said. I took the card. "Thank you, sir." Elias turned and walked away, blending back into the crowd. Chloe stood frozen. A dull, blotchy red crept up her neck. Andre stared at me. His expression was unreadable, a complex mixture of professional respect and deep, unsettling realization. He looked from me to Chloe, and the silence between them grew thick with unspoken questions. Before anyone could speak, a hand clamped down on my elbow. The grip was tight enough to bruise. Susan had been watching from the bar. She did not say a word. She just pulled. She dragged me away from the circle, weaving through the crowd, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. She did not stop until we reached the women's restroom. She shoved me through the heavy wooden door. The restroom was empty. White marble, gold fixtures, the harsh glare of fluorescent vanity lights. She let go of my arm and spun around to face me. Her chest heaved. "What do you think you are doing?" she hissed. Her voice echoed off the tile. I adjusted the sleeve of my blazer. I answered a question. "You humiliated your sister," she snapped, taking a step toward me. "You are a drafting assistant. You are here to hold the bag and hand out brochures. You do not speak over the lead designer. You do not show off to the judges. Who do you think you are?" I looked at my mother's reflection in the wide mirror above the sinks. The rigid posture, the desperate, frantic need to protect an illusion at all costs. She was willing to let a veteran judge walk away thinking her daughter was a fraud, rather than admit I possessed the talent she so desperately wanted Chloe to have. "She did not know the answer, Mom," I said calmly. She was about to fail a basic structural inquiry in front of her fiancé and a national judge. I kept her from looking incompetent. Susan slammed her hand on the marble counter. The sound cracked like a gunshot. "She is the visionary," Susan said, her voice shaking with suppressed rage. "You are just the hired help. You are lucky she even brought you on this trip. Do not ever forget your place again. Do not ever steal her spotlight." I looked at her. I did not yell. I did not defend my work. Arguing with a woman who demands submission is a waste of oxygen. "You are right," I said. "I am just the assistant. I will wait outside." I turned and walked out the door, leaving her standing alone in the harsh light. I walked down the hallway, back toward the main ballroom. I did not feel humiliated. I did not feel angry. The reprimand in the bathroom was just noise. It was the entry fee I had to pay to get inside the building. I walked past Chloe and Andre. I did not look at them. I moved toward the coat check near the rear exit. I had not flown to New York to impress Elias Vance. I had not come to save my sister from her own ignorance. I had spent the entire evening scanning the room for one specific person. He was standing near the cloakroom, finishing a glass of sparkling water. He wore a charcoal suit. On his left lapel was a small, distinct silver pin in the shape of a compass, the official emblem of the Foundation's executive board. His name was Thomas Sterling, Director of Legal Compliance and Intellectual Property for the National Design Foundation. I stepped in line behind him at the coat check. I dropped my napkin on the floor near his polished leather shoes. I bent down to pick it up, catching his eye as I straightened. "Excuse me," I said, offering a polite professional smile. "The acoustic design in this venue is remarkable. The baffling on the ceiling panels manages the crowd noise perfectly." He looked up at the ceiling, then back at me, his interest piqued by the specific observation. "It is," he agreed. "We specifically chose this space for the acoustic dampening. It makes networking much more bearable. You have a good eye for spatial design." I handed my ticket to the attendant. "I work in urban design," I said, "mostly structural planning. I am a big admirer of the Foundation's commitment to verifiable sustainability." Thomas smiled. "That is my department, compliance and verification. We take the integrity of the designs very seriously." He pulled out a business card and handed it to me. "Thomas Sterling. If you ever have a project you plan to submit, feel free to reach out. We are always looking for detail-oriented minds." I took the card. The heavy cardstock felt cool against my fingers. I read the email address printed below his name, the direct private contact line to the man who investigated fraud. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," I said. "I will keep that in mind." I retrieved my coat, walked out the glass doors, and stepped into the cold New York night. I slid the business card into my pocket next to the one Elias Vance had given me. Chloe had the spotlight, the applause, and the champagne. I had the blueprint, the metadata, and now, the executioner. 7 days before the National Design Awards, the Foundation released the final shortlist. They published it on their website at 9 in the morning. Chloe made the top 3. The dynamic inside my parents' house shifted immediately. The preliminary rounds were about prestige and social media validation. The finals were about something much heavier, The winner of the architectural category would receive a $250,000 grant to fund their future firm. It was no longer just a trophy. It was $250,000. That Thursday evening, I came back to the Evanston house after a site visit. My boots were wet with melted snow. I hung my coat in the hallway closet. The house was quiet, too quiet for a family celebrating a national nomination. Richard sat in the living room. The gas fireplace was running, casting long, flickering shadows against the walls. He wore his tailored work trousers and a crisp white shirt, the sleeves rolled up to the elbows. Susan sat on the adjacent leather sofa. She held a cup of chamomile tea, both hands wrapped around the porcelain. Chloe was not in the room. My father pointed to the armchair across from him. "Sit down, Maya." I did not sit. I stepped into the room and stopped behind the chair, resting my hands on the high backrest. On the glass coffee table between us lay a stack of printed paper. A silver fountain pen rested perfectly parallel to the edge of the documents. "We need to formalize a few details before the gala next week," Richard said. His tone was level, carrying the exact cadence he used to terminate employees at his corporate firm. I looked at the papers. "What is that?" "It is a standard non-disclosure and rights transfer agreement," he replied. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. "The foundation requires a clear chain of title for the winning design. Since you assisted your sister in the drafting process, we need your signature to prevent any future administrative confusion. It just states that your contributions were work for hire and that you waive any claim to the intellectual property." I stared at him. He was asking me to sign away 2 years of structural engineering, my original concept, and my legal copyright, wrapping the theft in corporate legal jargon. "I am not signing that," I said. Susan stirred her tea. The silver spoon clinked against the sides of the cup. Her eyes did not leave the liquid. "You are being difficult again, Maya. Your sister is under an immense amount of pressure. Do not make this about you." I looked at my mother. It is my blueprint. It has always been my blueprint. She stole a file off my computer. Richard stood up. The diplomatic manager vanished. The father who demanded absolute obedience took his place. He picked up the contract and held it out. "You will sign this paper today," he said. His voice dropped an octave, vibrating with authority. "You think you hold some kind of leverage because you know how to use drafting software? You do not. Your sister is the face of this project. She is the one the judges want. She is the one bringing $250,000 into this family." I kept my hands on the chair. "I do not care about the money. I care that she is a fraud." "She is a finalist," Richard countered, stepping closer. "And you are a freelance assistant, living in an apartment I guarantee. Now listen to me very carefully. If you refuse to sign this agreement, you are no longer a member of this family." The threat hung in the warm air of the living room. "You will pack your things tonight," he continued. "I will contact your landlord tomorrow and remove my name as your guarantor. You will be out on the street, but that is not the end of it." He lowered his voice further, transforming the ultimatum into a promise. "If you try to claim this design as your own, I will make sure you never work in this city again. I know people in the zoning department. I know developers. I will tell them the truth about my eldest daughter. I will tell them you suffered a severe psychological breakdown. I will tell them you are prone to delusions, that you steal ideas from your own sister because your mental state prevents you from working independently." Susan took a slow sip of her tea. "We just want what is best for your health, Maya," she said softly, maintaining the illusion. "We can arrange a private facility for you to rest. But you have to cooperate with your father." They had built the trap perfectly. Sign away my life's work or be thrown into the freezing Chicago winter while they actively dismantled my professional reputation using the stigma of mental illness. They expected me to cry. They expected me to beg for my home, to negotiate, to ultimately break under the weight of their combined cruelty. My pulse remained steady. The fear they tried to instill found no traction. When someone threatens to destroy your life to protect a lie, they inadvertently grant you a rare gift. They sever the final bond of obligation. I did not argue. I did not defend my sanity or my talent. I looked at the contract in his hand, then at the man holding it. "Keep your pen," I said. I turned around and walked down the hallway to my bedroom. I pulled my hard-shell suitcase from the closet. I did not pack everything. I left the sweaters they bought me for Christmas. I left the jewelry Susan handed down to me. I packed my laptop, my external hard drives, my winter boots, and enough clothes to survive a week in a hotel. I zipped the suitcase shut. The sound echoed in the quiet room. I grabbed the handle and rolled it down the hallway. Richard was waiting by the front door. He blocked the exit. His jaw was rigid. He had expected a fight, not a departure. "You walk out that door, you have nothing," he said. I looked him directly in the eyes. I have the math, and Chloe does not. I reached past him, turned the brass deadbolt, and pulled the heavy oak door open. The January wind hit my face, carrying the sharp scent of impending snow. Susan appeared from the living room. The gentle, concerned mother act vanished instantly. She raised her voice, letting the genuine venom spill out. "You ungrateful brat! You will come crawling back when you fail. You always do." I stepped onto the porch and pulled the door shut behind me. The heavy wood clicked into the frame, cutting off her words mid-sentence. The silence of the suburban street enveloped me. Streetlights cast pale yellow pools on the icy sidewalk. I pulled my wool scarf tighter around my neck and walked down the driveway. I did not look back at the house. When I reached the corner of the block, out of sight from the living room window, I stopped under a street lamp. I set my suitcase upright on the concrete. I pulled my phone from my coat pocket. My fingers were stiff from the cold, but my mind was operating with clinical precision. I opened my encrypted email client. I pulled up the contact file I'd saved 3 months ago in New York. Thomas Sterling, Director of Legal Compliance and Intellectual Property, National Design Foundation. I created a new message. I did not write a long emotional plea. I did not complain about my parents or mention the threats. I kept it strictly professional. Subject line read, "Official submission regarding intellectual property verification for finalist, Chloe." In the body of the email, I typed 2 sentences. "Mr. Sterling." Attached is the encrypted raw geometric data and the registered United States copyright documentation proving prior ownership of the Southside Community Center design. I attached the heavy zip file containing the CAD history, the embedded watermarks, and the legal copyright certificate. I did not send the decryption key. Without the key, the file was just a locked vault. Instead, I opened the scheduling feature on my email client. I drafted 2 automated messages. The first was scheduled for next Thursday at 8:25 in the evening, flagged with high priority and the subject line, "Urgent, legal compliance breach for architecture finalist. Check inbox at 8:30. I set the secondary automated message containing the alphanumeric decryption code for exactly 8:30. The exact moment the foundation president would step up to the podium at the gala to announce the winner. I tapped the screen. The progress bar filled. Scheduled delivery confirmed. I dropped the phone back into my pocket, grabbed the handle of my suitcase, and walked toward the train station. The trap was set, the timer was ticking, and there was nothing my family could do to stop it. The National Design Awards Gala was held in the grand ballroom of a luxury hotel in downtown Chicago. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm golden glow over 80 round tables draped in crisp white linen. The room hummed with the steady murmur of 500 architects, developers, and urban planners. Waiters in dark vests moved silently between the chairs, carrying silver trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I walked through the double doors at 7:45. I did not wear a designer gown. I wore a tailored navy suit I had bought 2 years ago for my graduate thesis defense. I did not buy a ticket. I had emailed Elias Vance 2 days prior, using the business card he gave me, asking if I could observe the finals. He left a VIP guest pass under my name at the door. I handed it to the attendant at the entrance. He scanned the barcode, glanced at the screen, and nodded. The pass granted me access, but it did not place me in the spotlight. My assigned seat was at table 72, tucked in the far back corner near the kitchen service doors. Every time a waiter pushed through, a blast of cold air and the clatter of porcelain washed over my back. I sat down and placed my sleek leather document tote on the table. My table mates were a mix of junior associates and logistics coordinators. They exchanged business cards and discussed zoning laws. I declined a glass of wine and asked the waiter for ice water. I did not engage in a networking. I kept my eyes fixed on the front of the room. Table 4 sat directly below the edge of the main stage, the VIP section. The centerpiece was a towering arrangement of white orchids. Chloe sat in the center chair, facing the stage. She wore a backless crimson gown that caught the stage lights every time she moved. She laughed often, tossing her hair over her shoulder, holding a champagne flute loosely in her left hand. Richard stood behind her chair, his tuxedo tailored perfectly. He shook hands with the men at the neighboring tables, projecting the image of a proud patriarch whose financial investments were about to yield a public return. Susan sat to Chloe's right, adjusting her pearl necklace and smiling at everyone who walked past. They looked exactly like the family they always pretended to be. Andre sat to Chloe's left. He did not look like the rest of them. He wore a sharp black tuxedo, but his posture was rigid. He did not hold a drink. He kept both hands resting flat on the table. While Chloe animatedly recounted a story to a woman across from her, Andre stared straight ahead at the empty podium. He checked his watch twice in 10 minutes. His jaw muscles flexed rhythmically. He was a man who understood the mechanics of heavy structures. Tonight, he looked like a man standing inside a building he suspected was about to collapse. At 8:10, the ambient music faded slightly. The ballroom lights dimmed, signaling the approaching start of the ceremony. Guests began returning to their seats. I watched Susan excuse herself from table 4. She navigated the narrow spaces between the chairs, heading toward the restrooms located in the rear corridor. Her path took her directly past table 72. She was looking at her phone, her expression relaxed and confident. She walked past my chair, took 3 more steps, and then stopped. She turned around slowly. The easy confidence vanished from her face. Shock replaced it. She took a step back toward my table. "Maya." Her voice was a tight whisper. She looked at my navy suit, then at the people sitting around me, then back at my face. "What are you doing here?" I picked up my water glass. "I was invited," I said. Susan glanced nervously toward the front of the room, checking to see if Richard or Chloe had noticed. The crowd obscured their view. She stepped closer to me, leaning down until her face was inches from mine. I could smell the sharp notes of her expensive perfume, mixed with the sour tang of white wine. "You packed your bags and walked out of our house," she hissed. She kept her volume low to avoid drawing the attention of my table mates. "You made your choice. You have no right to be here tonight." I took a sip of the ice water. The glass was cold against my fingers. I set it down on the coaster. "I have every right to be here." Susan placed her hand on the back of my chair. Her fingers gripped the wood tightly. "You are trying to sabotage your sister. You could not stand the thought of her succeeding while you sit in the back row. Listen to me very carefully, Maya." She leaned in closer. Her voice dropped to that familiar, punishing register she had used my entire life to force compliance. "She needs this opportunity more than you do. Just be a good sister and let her have it." I looked at the woman who had given birth to me, the woman who had watched her husband threaten to throw me into the winter streets and had done nothing but pack my bags faster. She was asking me to protect a thief. She was asking me to sacrifice myself so her favorite child could enjoy the warmth. I did not answer her. I did not defend my presence. I did not explain the trap that was currently ticking down in the Foundation server system. I just looked at her. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. Susan waited for the capitulation. She waited for me to drop my gaze, to apologize, to shrink. When I did none of those things, her certainty wavered. The rigid set of her shoulders faltered. She looked at my eyes and found cold, empty space. "Do not ruin this," she whispered. The threat lost its edge. A creeping fear replaced it. She straightened up, shot one last glare at me, and hurried back toward the VIP section without visiting the restroom. I watched her return to table 4. She leaned down and whispered into Richard's ear. Richard's head snapped up. He turned around in his chair, scanning the dark expanse of the ballroom until his eyes found table 72. Even from across the room, I could see the color drain from his face. He said something to Chloe. Chloe stopped laughing. She did not turn around. Her spine went rigid. She picked up her champagne flute and drained it in one long swallow. Andre noticed the shift in the table's dynamic. He looked at Richard, then at Chloe. Then he followed Richard's line of sight across the room. His eyes found mine. We stared at each other across the sea of white tables and crystal centerpieces. I did not look away. Andre did not look away either. I could see the realization hitting him in real time. He remembered the afternoon in my kitchen. He remembered the precise technical questions I had asked him about the concrete matrix and the geofoam layer. He remembered his fiancée's inability to answer a basic question about frost heave 3 months ago in New York. And now he saw the real architect sitting calmly in the back row of a closed industry event. Andre slowly lowered his hands from the table. He leaned back in his chair. He did not say a word to the family sitting next to him. He just watched me. At 8:25, a hush fell over the ballroom. I looked toward the side exit and knew Thomas Sterling's tablet had just lit up with the urgent warning, guaranteeing his eyes would be glued to his inbox in exactly 5 minutes. A single spotlight illuminated the center of the stage. The Master of Ceremonies, a senior board member of the foundation, stepped up to the acrylic podium. He adjusted the microphone.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the National Design Awards Gala.
A polite round of applause rippled through the room. The MC smiled.
Tonight, we celebrate the visionaries who shape our cities. We honor those who push the boundaries of sustainability, function, and aesthetic grace.
The defining criteria for the Architecture Award is given to an individual or firm for their meaningful contributions to the built environment that advance the understanding of our spatial experiences. This evening, the stakes are high. The winner of this category will receive a $250,000 grant to turn their concept into a reality. The applause swelled again. At table 4, Richard clapped loudly. Chloe touched her hair, preparing for the cameras. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone. The screen was dark. I pressed the side button. The lock screen illuminated. The time read 8:29. I unlocked the device and opened my encrypted email client. I navigated to the scheduled outbox. The automated message sat there, fully loaded. Destination: Thomas Sterling, Director of Legal Compliance. Subject line: Decryption key for Southside Community Center, original files. On stage, the MC opened a leather-bound folder. "We will begin tonight with the architecture category," he announced. His voice echoed through the speakers. "We have 3 extraordinary finalists this year. Let us look at their submissions." The giant LED screen behind the podium flickered to life. The room darkened further. The presentation began to roll. The first finalist was a team from Seattle, presenting a high-density modular housing unit designed for flood zones. The screen displayed their wireframe models, followed by a time-lapse of the construction phase. The second finalist was an independent architect from Boston who had designed a subterranean transit hub. The hub utilized kinetic energy from foot traffic to power its own lighting grids. Both projects were technically sound, rooted in verifiable physics and years of structural testing. They belonged on that stage. Andre watched the screen intently. He analyzed the load-bearing vectors and the stress test simulations of the first 2 nominees. He knew what a real architectural presentation looked like. It was not a mood board. It was a mathematical proof. The screen faded to black for a brief second. The third presentation loaded. The digital clock in the upper corner of my phone screen shifted. 8:30. A small blue progress bar appeared at the top of the email application. It filled rapidly from left to right. A faint swoosh sound played through the earpiece. The message vanished from the outbox folder and appeared in the sent folder.
The alphanumeric code that unlocked the hidden metadata layers in Chloe's submission files had just been delivered to the Foundation security network. I pressed the side button, turning the screen black. I placed the phone face down on the white tablecloth next to my water glass. I picked up the glass. The ice clinked softly against the rim. I took a slow sip. I did not look at the screen. I looked at the side staircase leading up to the stage, waiting for the Foundation's compliance team to receive the alert. The MC broke the seal on the thick black envelope. The sound echoed through the microphone, crisp and magnified. 500 people leaned forward in their chairs. The clinking of silverware ceased. And the winner of the National Design Award for Architecture is... The MC paused, letting the silence stretch for dramatic effect. Chloe, for the Southside Sustainable Community Center. The ballroom erupted. The applause started at the front tables and rolled toward the back, a wave of sound crashing against the walls. A bright white spotlight snapped onto table 4, illuminating the centerpiece and the people surrounding it. Richard stood up so fast his chair wobbled. He threw his arms in the air, a wide, triumphant grin stretching across his face. He pulled Chloe into a tight embrace, kissing her cheek. Susan clapped her hands together, her face flushed with the kind of pride reserved for a queen watching her heir take the throne. She held her phone high, recording every second of the victory. Andre remained seated. He clapped, but the rhythm was slow, measured, lacking the frantic energy of the parents beside him. His eyes flicked from Chloe to the stage, then back to the empty air in front of him. He knew the math did not add up. Chloe stood. She smoothed the front of her crimson silk gown, ensuring the fabric draped perfectly for the cameras. She hugged Richard again, kissed Andre on the cheek, and began her walk toward the stage. The spotlight tracked her every step. The applause swelled as she climbed the central stairs, her heels clicking against the polished wood. The MC stepped forward, holding a heavy glass trophy. It was shaped like a rising spire, catching the stage lights and fracturing them into tiny prisms. He handed it to Chloe. She took it with both hands, holding it near her collarbone. She stepped up to the acrylic podium, adjusted the microphone downward, and offered a breathtaking, tearful smile to the audience. "Thank you," she said. Her voice wavered with practiced emotion. The breathy pitch echoed through the speakers. "Thank you so much. I cannot begin to describe what this moment means to me." I sat at table 72 in the dark, my hands resting in my lap. I watched her grip my future. Architecture is not just about drawing lines on paper, Chloe continued, her confidence growing as the audience settled into a respectful silence. It is about vision. It is about the sleepless nights, the endless revisions, the moments where you doubt your own capacity but push through anyway. This community center is my heart. I poured 2 years of my life into every calculation, every material choice, every structural decision. I wanted to build something that would outlast us all. Every word she spoke tightened the spring of the trap. She claimed the sleepless nights she spent sleeping. She claimed the calculations she could not comprehend. She dug her heels into a foundation she did not lay. "I want to thank my parents," she said, gesturing toward table 4. The camera operator zoomed in on Richard and Susan. The large LED screen behind Chloe displayed their beaming faces. For always believing in my vision. For supporting my talent when no one else did. I took a slow breath. I looked away from the stage and checked the side stairs near the velvet curtain. Thomas Sterling stepped out from the shadows. He wore his charcoal suit. 2 men in dark blazers flanked him. They did not move with the casual pace of event staff. They moved with the synchronized, rigid momentum of law enforcement. Chloe kept talking. "Sustainability means building a foundation that can weather any storm, and that is exactly what this design represents." Sterling reached the top of the stairs. He did not wait for her to finish her sentence. He walked directly across the stage, stepping into the harsh glare of the spotlight. The 2 men in dark blazers stopped a few feet behind him, forming a human barrier. Chloe saw him approaching from her peripheral vision. She frowned, confused by the breach of protocol. She leaned back from the microphone. "Excuse me," she whispered, though the mic picked it up. "I am giving my speech." Sterling ignored her. He bypassed her entirely and walked straight to the MC, who was standing near the wing. Sterling leaned in and spoke 3 words into the MC's ear. The MC's polite, professional smile vanished. He nodded sharply and raised his hand toward the AV booth at the back of the room. He drew a quick horizontal line across his throat. Chloe turned back to the audience. As I was saying, true innovation requires... Her voice died. The sound engineer cut the audio feed. Chloe tapped the microphone grill. A dull, physical thump echoed faintly, but the amplification was gone. She looked at the MC, her brow furrowed in irritation. My microphone is off. The MC did not step forward to fix it. He took 2 steps backward, distancing himself from her. The ballroom fell into a sudden, plunging silence. 500 guests stopped breathing. The clinking of glasses vanished. The ambient noise of the room drained away. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning vents in the ceiling. Sterling stepped up to the podium. He did not ask Chloe to move. He stood beside her, occupying her space, forcing her to step aside. He pulled a secondary microphone from the inside pocket of his suit jacket and switched it on. Ladies and gentlemen, Sterling's voice boomed through the hall, rich, gravelly, and stripped of any celebratory warmth. My name is Thomas Sterling. I am the Director of Legal Compliance and Intellectual Property for the National Design Foundation. A low murmur rippled through the front tables. Legal compliance? It was not a title anyone expected to hear during an awards gala. The integrity of this institution rests on the verifiable authenticity of the work we honor, Sterling continued, his eyes scanning the crowd. 5 minutes ago, our security network received an automated decryption key. It unlocked a hidden metadata layer inside the winning submission files, and our engineers have instantly verified its contents against the United States copyright database. Chloe stood frozen to his left. She gripped the glass trophy, her knuckles turning white. The crimson dress seemed to lose its luster. She looked down at table 4, seeking Richard. Richard had stopped smiling. He was leaning forward, his hands gripping the edge of the table, his face draining of color. We have a confirmed, actionable instance of intellectual property theft regarding the winning submission, Sterling stated. The words dropped like anvils onto the hardwood floor. We do not deal in accusations. We deal in data. Sterling turned his head toward the AV booth. Override the presentation feed. Display the decrypted raw file. The giant LED screen behind them flickered. The beautiful, glossy 3D render of the community center disappeared. In its place, the stark gray interface of a CAD software program filled the 30-foot screen. It was the raw geometry of the building, the skeleton of the design. A mouse cursor, controlled by the technician in the booth, moved swiftly across the screen. The audience watched in dead silence as the cursor navigated to the layer management panel on the right side of the interface. It scrolled past the visible layers: exterior facade, HVAC routing, electrical grid. It stopped on a hidden locked layer at the very bottom of the directory. The layer was titled Soil Grading Analysis. The cursor clicked the lock icon. A command prompt box appeared in the center of the giant screen. It demanded a cryptographic key. The audience watched as a string of 32 random alphanumeric characters auto-populated the text field. The key I had scheduled to send at 8:30. The prompt vanished. The layer unlocked. Extract the metadata, Sterling ordered into his microphone. The cursor clicked a secondary command. The wireframe model of the building on the screen suddenly turned transparent. The foundational grid of the central atrium rotated, zooming in past the concrete support pillars, past the rebar schematics, diving deep into the core code of the rendering. A block of text materialized. It started small, then expanded as the software isolated the embedded watermark. It stretched across the dark screen, glowing in stark, undeniable white letters, 10 feet tall, hanging directly above Chloe's head. Original Concept and Structural Engineering by Maya, registered U.S. copyright. The silence in the ballroom shattered. It did not break into polite murmurs. It broke into a cacophony of gasps. sharp intakes of breath, and loud whispers. 500 architects, developers, and judges stared at the screen, reading the irrefutable digital fingerprint that proved the woman on stage was a fraud. Chloe turned around slowly. She tilted her head back and looked up at the giant letters. Her mouth fell open. The glass trophy in her hands trembled. She looked like a trespasser caught inside a vault when the lights suddenly snapped on. At table 4, Susan covered her mouth with both hands, letting out a stifled, strangled sound. Richard stood frozen, staring at the name Maya glowing on the screen. The threat he had made in the living room, the non-disclosure agreement he had tried to force upon me, all of it crumbled to ash under the weight of federal copyright law. Andre pushed his chair back. The metal legs screeched against the floor. He stood up. He did not look at the screen. He looked at the woman he was supposed to marry, standing on a stage holding a stolen award. The realization he had fought against for 3 months solidified into absolute certainty. Sterling turned to Chloe. His expression held no pity. "Miss," Sterling said, his voice cold and amplified, "you are holding property that does not belong to you." Chloe's grip on the crystal trophy tightened until her knuckles turned bone white. The red silk of her gown rustled sharply as she took a frantic step toward the center of the stage. She reached for the primary microphone on the podium, desperate to control the narrative, but Thomas Sterling stepped into her path, blocking her access. "This is a mistake," Chloe said. Her voice echoed through the secondary microphone Sterling held, amplified across the silent ballroom. She forced a laugh, high, breathless, and entirely hollow. "This is a gross misunderstanding. My sister Maya is a drafting assistant. She handles data entry and file management for my firm. She must have hacked my cloud storage and altered the presentation files. She inserted her name to sabotage me." She looked down at the VIP tables, her eyes wide, searching for her father. "Dad, tell them!" "She has a history of doing things like this. Tell them she has a history of mental instability." A low murmur rippled through the audience. A few architects in the front rows exchanged uneasy glances, shifting in their seats. Chloe was playing her final, most destructive card. She was using the exact lie Richard had threatened to spread a week ago. She was attempting to weaponize the stigma of mental illness on a national stage to shield her own incompetence. Sterling did not blink. He did not look at the crowd. He looked down at the tablet computer resting in his left hand, the screen illuminating his face with a pale blue glow. "Miss," Sterling said, his voice carrying the flat, surgical precision of a prosecutor. "The cryptographic key we received unlocked a metadata layer embedded directly into the foundational geometry of the CAD file. The United States Copyright Office confirms this specific sequence of code, along with the structural math, was registered 24 months ago. Your initial project file creation date, according to our server scan, is recorded as October 12th of this year." He looked up from the tablet, meeting her panicked gaze. "You cannot hack a federal registry backward in time. The math does not support your claim." He turned toward the edge of the stage. "The Foundation has zero tolerance for intellectual property theft. Hand me the award." Chloe took another step back, her heels catching on the edge of the carpeted riser. She pulled the heavy glass spire against her chest, shaking her head. "No. I worked on this. This is my vision. You cannot do this to me." 2 security officers moved swiftly up the side stairs. They wore dark suits and clear earpieces, their posture relaxed but coiled with readiness. They flanked Sterling, creating a physical barrier between Chloe and the podium. "Escort her off the stage," Sterling ordered. Down at table 4, Richard broke. The polished, composed facade of the corporate executive shattered instantly. He pushed his chair back with enough force to send it crashing into the table behind him, rattling the silverware and knocking over a water glass. He charged toward the stage. "Get your hands off my daughter!" Richard shouted, his voice cracking with panic. He reached the bottom of the stairs, his face flushed a dark, angry red, his expensive silk tie skewed to the side. A third security guard, stationed near the front row, stepped into his path and placed a firm, unyielding hand squarely on his chest. Richard swatted at the guard's arm, his movements erratic. "Do you know who I am? I am Richard Farrow. This is a misunderstanding. My eldest daughter is unwell. She forged those documents to ruin her sister. I demand to speak to the Foundation president right now." "Sir, step back immediately," the guard warned. His voice dropped into a sharp, authoritative register that echoed over the ambient noise. He gripped Richard's shoulder, halting his forward momentum entirely. The ballroom, previously held in a state of suspended shock, erupted into a loud, chaotic hum. 500 of the most influential developers, urban planners, and designers in the country were watching a family tear itself apart over stolen blueprints. Phones were discreetly pulled out. Whispers turned into urgent conversations. I stood up from table 72. I did not rush. I picked up the thick manila envelope I had carried with me on the train from my apartment. I walked out from the shadows near the kitchen service doors and stepped into the main center aisle. The walk felt endless, yet the distance closed rapidly. As I moved forward under the crystal chandeliers, the people sitting at the outer tables noticed me first. The woman in the plain navy suit, the woman whose name was currently projected in 10-foot-high glowing white letters across the giant LED screen on stage. The crowd parted. Chairs scraped against the polished hardwood floor as guests physically pulled back, clearing a wide path for me. I walked past the junior associates whispering behind their hands, past the senior partners watching with clinical interest, past the preliminary judges. I caught Elias Vance's eye as I passed table 12. He sat back in his chair and gave a slow, measured nod. He remembered the networking event on the rooftop in New York. He remembered the geophone calculations. He understood the equation now. I reached the front of the room. Richard was still arguing with the security guard, his voice hoarse, sweat beading on his forehead. He did not see me approach until I was standing less than 2 feet away. He stopped shouting mid-sentence. The angry red flush drained from his face, leaving a sickly pale gray in its wake. He stared at me as if I were a ghost. "Maya," he said. The words sounded like ground glass in his throat. I ignored him. I stepped past his frozen form, walked directly to the judge's table situated just below the stage, and dropped the heavy manila envelope onto the polished wood. I pulled the metal clasp. The official United States copyright certificate slid out, bearing the federal seal, my legal name, the detailed architectural schematics, and the exact timestamp from 2 years prior. "I brought the receipts," I said, looking directly at the head judge. The judge, a distinguished woman with silver hair and severe glasses, picked up the document. She reviewed the embossed seal, checked the registration dates against the screen, and looked up at me. She nodded once, a definitive, silent confirmation of authenticity. A sharp, frantic tug on my left sleeve pulled my attention away from the table. Susan was standing there. She had followed Richard from the VIP section. Her face was streaked with running mascara, leaving dark tracks down her cheeks. Her pearl necklace sat crooked against her collarbone. She gripped my jacket fabric tightly, her manicured nails digging through the wool into my arm. "How could you do this?" she sobbed. The tears were genuine now, born of sudden crushing public humiliation and the evaporation of her social standing. "To your own blood. We gave you everything. You are destroying your sister. You are destroying this family." She expected me to shrink. She expected the conditioned guilt that had governed my entire childhood to rise up, choke me, and force an apology. She expected me to comfort her, to retract my claim, to save her in front of the watching cameras. I looked down at her hand clutching my sleeve. I reached over, peeled her trembling fingers off my jacket one by one, and let her hand drop to her side. "You chose a thief over your daughter," I said. I kept my voice low, steady, ensuring only the people at the front tables could hear the finality in my tone. "You threatened to throw me into the freezing street. You threatened to lie about my sanity to protect a fraud. I am not destroying anything. I am just cleaning up the mess you made." Susan shrank back as if she had been struck. She covered her mouth with both hands, a strangled, wet noise escaping her throat. She looked around the room, her eyes darting from face to face, searching for a sympathetic look, an ally, anyone who would validate her victimhood. She found none. The elite crowd stared back at her with cold, silent judgment. On stage, the security officers closed in on Chloe. She looked at the guards, then down at the ruined scene below. Her father, detained by security, her mother, weeping uncontrollably, the undeniable federal proof of her theft sitting openly on the judge's table. Her shoulders slumped. She slowly lowered her arms. Sterling reached out and took the glass trophy from her hands. The crystal prism caught the stage light one last time before he handed it to a waiting assistant in the wings. "This way, miss," the lead guard said, gesturing toward the side exit, leading to the service corridors. Chloe walked down the stairs, her head bowed, the hem of her expensive crimson silk dress dragging heavily across the floor, gathering dust. At table 4, Andre had not spoken a single word. He had watched the entire sequence unfold with the terrifying stillness of a man observing a controlled demolition. He watched Chloe attempt to lie her way out of federal theft. He watched Richard try to physically bully the security team. He watched Susan deploy her tears as a final, desperate weapon. He watched me deliver the irrefutable documentation. He was a real estate developer. He built skyscrapers. He understood the structural integrity of foundations better than anyone in the room. He understood the structural integrity of this family now. It was built entirely on hollow ground, held together by extortion and lies. Andre stood up. He did not rush forward to comfort Susan. He did not step in to defend Richard from the guards. He looked at Chloe as she reached the bottom of the stairs. She stopped and looked up at him, her eyes wide, pleading silently for him to intervene, to save her, to offer the financial and social shield he had always provided. She reached a trembling hand out toward him. Andre looked at her outstretched hand. He looked at the woman he had intended to marry, seeing her clearly for the very first time. He reached into the inner breast pocket of his tailored tuxedo jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it, removed the flawless 3-carat diamond engagement ring he had purchased 6 months ago, and set the empty black box aside. He held the ring between his thumb and forefinger for a fraction of a second, letting the ambient light catch the facets. Then he dropped it onto the center of the VIP table. The heavy platinum band hit the thick glass of the table setting with a sharp, piercing clink that cut cleanly through the murmur of the room. He did not say a word to her. He did not offer an explanation, demand an apology, or raise his voice. He turned his broad back on the table, walked up the center aisle, pushed through the heavy oak double doors at the back of the ballroom, and walked straight out into the Chicago night. Chloe let out a raw, jagged sound, something between a gasp and a scream. She took a desperate step toward the doors, but the security guard stepped in, gently but firmly redirecting her toward the service exit, removing her from the floor. Richard stood frozen against the security guard's hold, staring blankly at the diamond ring resting next to the discarded white linen napkins. The financial lifeline he had been counting on to clear his mounting debts, the prestigious marriage he had banked his entire social standing on, had just walked out the door and was never coming back. Stood near the podium, my hands empty, the copyright certificate resting securely on the table. The trap had sprung, the toxic structure had collapsed under its own weight, and the truth stood alone in the center of the room, requiring no further defense. Monday morning arrived with the crisp efficiency of a gavel striking wood. The National Design Foundation did not handle intellectual property theft behind closed doors. At 8 a.m, an official press release went live on their homepage and was immediately syndicated across every major architectural digest and industry newsletter in the country. The headline was surgical. Finalists disqualified for fraudulent submission. They named Chloe. They detailed the specific breach of ethics regarding the stolen CAD files and the embedded copyright metadata. The foundation announced a lifetime ban, permanently prohibiting her from entering any future competitions, holding any committee seat, or attending any foundation-sanctioned events. In the American architectural industry, a public denunciation by the National Design Foundation is absolute career destruction. It is a tight-knit ecosystem of firms, developers, and city planners. By noon, Chloe's name was toxic. The boutique design agency in downtown Chicago that had offered her a junior partner position pending her award victory rescinded the offer via a 2-sentence email. The American Institute of Architects sent a formal notice that her associate membership was under immediate review for revocation. The high-end contractors she had schmoozed at networking events stopped returning her calls. In a profession built on structural precision and legal trust, a documented thief holds zero value. Her degree became a very expensive paperweight. The professional downfall was swift, but the financial ruin was slower and much more painful. My parents had built an illusion of wealth on a foundation of debt. To fund Chloe's lavish lifestyle, the designer clothes she wore to galas, the expensive PR consultant they hired to secure her magazine features, and the luxury apartment they rented for her in the Gold Coast, Richard and Susan had taken out a second mortgage on the Evanston townhouse. They had maxed out 3 high-yield credit cards. They had taken a predatory bridge loan, betting their entire retirement security on the assumption that Chloe would win the $250,000 grant. They planned to pay off the debts and bask in the glory of their successful daughter. Without the prize money, the math caught up with them. Creditors do not care about family pride. They care about the 30-day billing cycle. The social humiliation compounded the financial rot. Susan had spent months bragging to her country club friends about her genius daughter. Now, she faced a town that read the foundation's press release. The invitations to charity dinner stopped arriving. Her friends suddenly found themselves too busy for lunch. The polite, icy distance of wealthy suburban society froze her out. She could no longer walk into the local country club without feeling the heavy, silent stares of women who knew exactly what her family had done. I did not hear from them on Sunday. They were likely scrambling, trying to figure out a way to spin the disaster. But by Tuesday, reality set in. I sat at the small desk in my temporary hotel room working on a new urban grading schematic. My phone began to vibrate against the wood. I did not answer. I kept my pencil moving along the edge of the T-square. I let the calls go to voicemail. I drank my black coffee and listened to the audio recordings pile up in my inbox. The first voicemail came from Richard. His voice lacked the corporate authority he usually wielded. He sounded out of breath, frantic. "Maya, you need to call the foundation. Tell them you gave her permission to use the files. Tell them it was an administrative misunderstanding over the paperwork. We can split the prize money with you, 50-50. Just call them and retract the complaint. Chase Bank just issued a notice of default on the equity line. We are going to lose the house." I deleted the message. An hour later, Susan left a voicemail. She was crying, a wet, ragged sound punctuated by the noise of a glass shattering in the background. "How can you sleep at night? Your father is talking to bankruptcy lawyers. Chloe has not left her bedroom in 2 days. She is ruined. We are all ruined. You destroyed your own family over a blueprint. Answer the phone." By Wednesday afternoon, the tone shifted from bargaining and guilt to raw desperation. Richard called again. "Maya, please, I cannot cover the minimum payments. The interest rate on the bridge loan is crushing us. We will lose everything. You have to fix this. You are our daughter." I listened to the messages playing through the small speaker of my phone. I felt the shape of the guilt they were trying to hand me, the same weaponized guilt I had carried since childhood. It felt foreign now. I did not want it. I did not call them back. I did not argue. Arguing provides an opponent with oxygen. I chose absolute silence. I opened my laptop and compiled a digital folder. I exported every frantic voicemail. I pulled up the text messages where Richard had threatened to cancel my lease guarantor's signature. I retrieved the hidden audio recording from my phone, the one I had captured in the living room when Richard threw the non-disclosure agreement on the coffee table and threatened to smear my sanity to the zoning board if I did not sign away my copyright. I searched the directory of Chicago law firms and found a litigator specializing in domestic harassment and civil protection. I sent the encrypted folder to her office. I met with the attorney on Thursday morning. We sat in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the Chicago River. Her name was Evelyn. She wore a sharp gray suit and listened to the audio files without changing her expression. She heard my father threatening my livelihood and my reputation. She reviewed the voicemails of the ongoing harassment. Financial manipulation and sustained harassment, Evelyn noted, tapping her silver pen against the legal pad. They used your basic need for housing as a weapon to force the surrender of intellectual property. Now they are harassing you to cover up a federal copyright crime. We have more than enough for a plenary order of protection. I want a wall, I told her, a legal one. Evelyn slid a stack of documents across the oak table. Sign here. I signed my name on the dotted line. On Friday afternoon, a process server arrived at the Evanston townhouse. I did not witness it, but Evelyn forwarded the confirmation of service to my email. The judge had granted the emergency protective order. It mandated a strict 500-foot boundary. Richard, Susan, and Chloe were legally barred from contacting me by phone, email, text, or third-party proxy. They were forbidden from approaching my residence or my place of employment. Any violation would result in an immediate arrest warrant. The structural integrity of my family collapsed because they built it on stolen ground. They had weaponized their financial resources to keep me subordinate. They had used the threat of homelessness to extract my labor. Now, the natural consequences of their actions stripped them of the very resources they used to oppress me. Richard and Susan faced the imminent foreclosure of the home they prized so highly. They were buried in debt incurred for a prize that never existed. Chloe faced a lifetime banishment from the only career path she desired, left with a hollow resume and a tarnished name. They had sacrificed their eldest daughter to ensure the success of the youngest. In doing so, they had engineered their own ruin. The phone stopped ringing. The threats ceased. The silence that filled my hotel room was not the tense, waiting silence of a battlefield. It was the deep, resonant quiet of a war that had already been won. 6 months pass. The freezing Chicago winter thaws into a sharp, bright spring. I stand on the corner of a vacant block on the south side. I wear a white hard hat and heavy steel-toed boots. Gray dust coats the hem of my jeans. In front of me, an industrial excavator breaks ground, its metal teeth tearing through the frozen topsoil. The sound of the diesel engine fills the air, loud and reverberating against the nearby brick walls. It is the most beautiful noise I have ever heard. It sounds like momentum. It sounds like freedom. I am not standing in the shadows holding a leather portfolio for someone else. I am standing in the daylight holding the master blueprints. My blueprints. The National Design Foundation did not just issue a press release and walk away. Organizations built on the strict principles of structural integrity prefer to balance the scales permanently. 3 weeks after the gala, Thomas Sterling requested a formal meeting. We sat in a glass-walled boardroom overlooking the Chicago River. He placed a thick folder on the polished oak table between us. "The Compliance Board reviewed your decrypted files," he said. His voice carried the same gravelly weight it had on the stage, but the cold edge was gone. "The engineering is flawless. The geofoam integration and the hydrostatic pressure calculations are exactly the kind of verifiable innovation this institution exists to fund." He opened the folder and slid a single sheet of paper toward me. It was not a certificate or a printed apology. It was a wire transfer authorization. $250,000. The foundation had formally revoked the nomination from the fraudulent applicant and awarded the grant to the registered copyright holder. I used the funds to secure the land permits and hire a union construction crew. The Sustainable Community Center is no longer a digital render sitting on a stolen hard drive. It is a physical foundation being poured into the earth. A silver sedan pulls up to the perimeter fence of the construction site. The tires crunch over the loose gravel. Andre steps out. He wears a tailored charcoal suit, but his posture has changed. The effortless, assumed superiority of the wealthy developer is gone, replaced by a grounded, observant stillness. He navigates the uneven dirt, careful to avoid the mud tracks, and stops beside me. He does not offer a hollow hug. He does not ask how my parents are doing. He looks at the excavator, watches the crew lay out the rebar grid, and then looks at me. "The grading on the eastern elevation looks solid," he notes. "We hit a clay deposit earlier than the soil reports indicated," I reply, keeping my eyes on the machinery. "We adjusted the retaining wall depth by 3 feet to compensate for the moisture retention." Andre nods slowly. He understands the math. He reaches into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulls out a bound document. He hands it to me. I owe you an apology, Maya. He says the words clearly, making no excuses, offering no justification for his past blindness. I looked at a brilliant structural engineer and saw a drafting assistant because that is the narrative I was handed by people I trusted. I should have asked to see the math myself. I look at the document in my hands. The cover page bears the embossed logo of his commercial real estate firm in Atlanta. What is this? It is a joint venture contract, he says. My firm just acquired a commercial block in the West Loop. We plan to convert it into a mixed-use eco-hub. I need a lead architect who understands sustainable load-bearing integration and who does not cut corners. I want to hire your firm. I study his face. He is not trying to buy my forgiveness. He is not acting out of pity. He is not trying to mend the fractured ties of a family he wisely abandoned at a VIP table 6 months ago. He is a businessman looking at a valuable asset, recognizing the exact worth of the professional standing in front of him. I pull a pen from the front pocket of my safety vest. I do not harbor resentment toward him. Holding on to anger requires an emotional energy I prefer to spend on building tall structures. I flip to the signature page, sign my name on the dotted line, and hand the contract back. Send the initial site surveys to my office by Tuesday morning, I tell him. He takes the contract, offers a firm professional handshake, and walks back to his car. My office is now a bright, open loft filled with drafting tables and morning light, funded by my own labor. 30 miles away, in a gray, sprawling suburb far beyond the manicured lawns of Evanston, my family lives a very different reality. The eviction notice on the townhouse arrived 2 months after the gala. The bridge loans, the second mortgage, the maxed-out credit cards, the entire financial house of cards collapsed the moment the prize money vanished and the industry doors slammed shut. The bank seized the property. They now live in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment above a dying strip mall. The walls are paper-thin. The hum of a neon liquor store sign buzzes through their cheap glass windows all night. There are no vaulted ceilings to echo their complaints, no mahogany dining table to host their Sunday dinners. Susan cannot invite the country club women over for tea. Richard cannot threaten to put anyone on the street because he no longer owns the street. Chloe lives in the second bedroom. The blacklist from the National Design Foundation acted like a professional contagion. The industry expelled her. Without a career, without Andre's wealth, and without the illusion of her own brilliance, the reality of her choices caught up to her quickly. She works behind the register at a local discount home goods store. She scans barcodes and folds cheap towels for minimum wage. She hands her paycheck over to Richard and Susan every 2 weeks to help cover the crushing monthly interest on their residual debt. There are no more galas. There are no more designer gowns or champagne flutes. They sit in that small, suffocating apartment, trapped together by the exact same greed they used to try and trap me. They built their own cage, locked the door from the inside, and swallowed the key. I stand at the edge of the construction site, watching the concrete pour over the rebar. The city moves around me with relentless purpose. It does not care about family drama or stolen trophies. It only cares about what you can build and whether the foundation is strong enough to hold the weight. For 28 years, I believed I had to earn my place at a table where the seats were rigged. I believed my blood tied me to their demands. I thought loyalty meant handing over my tools so someone else could take the credit for the house. I learned the hardest way possible that self-respect is the quietest, most effective form of justice. You do not have to scream. You do not have to argue with people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You just have to gather your evidence, state your truth, and walk out the door. You do not need to set yourself on fire to keep people warm who do not appreciate you. Looking back at everything that happened, there are 5 truths I learned about surviving a toxic family. The first is that self-respect is the ultimate form of retribution. My journey proves that true justice does not require screaming matches or stooping to the level of your abusers. My revenge wasn't born out of a desire to inflict pain, but rather a fierce commitment to my own dignity. I realized that trying to convince a family committed to misunderstanding me was a waste of energy. The most powerful thing you can do when faced with chronic disrespect is to simply refuse to participate in the illusion. The second lesson is to always keep your receipts. In families ruled by narcissism and manipulation, the truth is often distorted by whoever cries the loudest or plays the victim the best. I knew that verbal arguments would be weaponized against me. Instead of debating, I secured undeniable federal proof: a registered U.S. copyright and encrypted digital watermarks. When you are dealing with manipulative individuals, words are meaningless. Hard evidence, timestamps, and legal documentation are the only shields that cannot be gaslit. The third truth is that silence is a strategic and devastating weapon. When I discovered the theft, my first instinct wasn't to expose Chloe immediately. I chose silence. By keeping my preparations completely hidden, I created a massive gap in information. My family interpreted my silence as submission, which fueled their arrogance and led Chloe directly onto a national stage with stolen property. Sometimes, the best response to an attack is to stay quiet, gather your strength in the shadows, and let the toxic individuals build the very trap that will eventually serve as their downfall. The fourth lesson is that control is often disguised as family loyalty. My parents used every lever of power they possessed, threatening to pull my apartment lease and promising to smear my mental health, all under the guise of doing what is best for the family. This perfectly highlights how toxic dynamics rely on financial extortion and emotional blackmail to keep the scapegoat subordinate. My ultimate liberation came the exact moment I decided I was willing to lose everything rather than surrender my integrity to a lie. The final truth is that your true tribe will recognize your real value. While my parents treated me as a disposable assistant to my visionary sister, the actual experts in the room saw the truth. Elias Vance recognized my brilliant engineering mind, and Andre, a seasoned developer, saw through Chloe's aesthetic facade the moment I started asking technical questions. When you stop shrinking yourself to fit into a family that refuses to value you, you create the space for people who respect your genuine competence and character to enter your life. If you have ever had to walk away from a toxic family dynamic to protect your own sanity, drop a 1 in the comments right now to let others know they are not alone. Subscribe to Sweet Life Drama for more intense stories of betrayal, survival, and ultimate justice. And remember, no matter who tries to take the credit for your hard work, always keep your receipts.